And we welcome you back to the March to Minneapolis here on Your View. And let's start by taking a look at the bids by conference. The three power big conferences up there, Big Ten with 8, SEC with 7, and the ACC with 7. Adam, the committee chair, noted that this year 11 conferences got 2 or more bids. That's up from 9 a year ago. That was a point that the committee was very proud of.
Well, the parity in college basketball has never been greater. The mid-major leagues making more of a presence. UNCG, we already talked about it, last team out, would have given you yet another mid-major program in the field, and a great year for the American Athletic Conference as well.
The ACC got 7 bids. 3 of those 7, though, are number 1 seeds. Are you okay with that?
I thought that was the right choice. What fascinates me about the ACC is they're a conference without a middle class. North Carolina, Virginia, Duke absolutely deserve to be top seeds. But you go from those powerhouses to the bottom without very much fluff in between. So to only have 4 other teams make the tournament when you have 3 number 1 seeds was a pretty unique deal.
Let's take a look at the Midwest bracket and focus on some of the teams there as that bracket lays out there. And there's one of those ACC teams we were just talking about. North Carolina is the number 1 seed as they will face Iona. How about the 5-12 with Auburn against New Mexico State? Auburn gets its first SEC tournament title since 1985, but they're going to be facing a New Mexico State team that has won 19 straight and was the runaway winner in the WAC.
Well, it's also a New Mexico State team that plays 13 or 14 guys a night. Just throws bodies at you. Bruce Pearl, used to being the aggressor, used to getting other teams rattled. New Mexico State, it's going to be like looking in the mirror, but looking in the mirror against a team that plays in even more waves than Auburn ever has. That's a fascinating matchup.
Kansas is not used to seeing a number 4 next to their name. It's the first time that Kansas is not a 1 through or 3 seed since 2006, and a lot of folks are wondering, can this Kansas team even get out of the first weekend?
It's going to be tough because it's a very good Northeastern team led by Bill Cohen they're going to face in that first round, and then whoever wins that Auburn-New Mexico State matchup is really going to look to exploit Kansas's lack of depth. Obviously, they're missing a couple of guys from the beginning of the season, so whether it's Auburn or New Mexico State, you can bet it's going to be 40 minutes of pressure to really challenge Kansas.
Let's take a look at the other side of the bracket here in the Midwest Regional. Houston is a 3. A lot of people have not paid attention to Houston out of the American. 31 wins at the school record, what Kelvin Sampson has done there in Houston as they win their first conference title since 1992, and more than 10 times this season scored more than 80 points. Watch out for Houston there at number 3. But I know you're interested in the game right below that, Wofford and Seton Hall.
Wofford and Seton Hall, to me, is going to be one of the best matchups of the first round. I mean, you've got a Wofford team that may be among the best mid-major teams in the entire country, and then a Seton Hall team that just made a terrific run in the Big East and yet is the underdog coming into that game. I think Kevin Willard's doing a heck of a job. In my book, they're the favorite. That could be an upset, so to speak.
One of those great games you enjoy watching there in the first weekend of the tournament. We talked about the East a little earlier when we focused on LSU at the number 3 versus number 14 Yale. Let's take a look at the other half of the Eastern bracket now and focus on a couple of the games there. We're going to spend a little time talking more about the East in general. But here's the other half, of course. Duke's there at number 1, the number 1 overall seed in this tournament. Mississippi State out of the SEC comes in at 5 versus 12. Virginia Tech, you know, people talk Hokies, they talk football. They're not really used to talking Hokies in basketball, but there they are as a number 4 seed.
Well, it all comes down to Justin Robinson. Buzz Williams announced on Twitter that he's coming back, but the question is, how good is he going to be? He was in a boot just a couple of days ago. We know he's not going to be 100%. Is he 70%? Is he 80%? Is he just giving it a try because he's a Warrior? We don't know, and that's the big factor for Virginia Tech.
We mentioned LSU being the number 3 in the East. We loop back to that in a moment because a little earlier I was asking you about some X's and O's, and you pointed out very accurately that a lot of times it's going to come down to that point guard play can LSU in terms of controlling the tempo against a very disciplined Yale team. Well, that point guard is a very interesting connection between LSU and the team they're going to face in Jacksonville.
Well, Tremont Waters, the all-SEC point guard for LSU, he's from New Haven, Connecticut, the location of Yale University. In fact, he grew up learning how to play, his dad trained him. Dad worked with him in the Yale Fieldhouse almost every day. Yale recruited him. He was a 4.0 student. So this is a guy who knows the opposition very well, still plays with the Yale players when he goes home in the summer. So that is certainly a very intriguing subplot of this Yale-LSU game.
It'll be fun to see how that one plays out. And for more on that game and the East, let's bring in Kevin McNamara, who joins us now via Skype, one of the columnists for college basketball, who covers all things basketball. And Kevin, great having you with us. And let's start right there. I want to get your thoughts on this LSU-Yale 3-14 matchup.
Yeah, interesting game. You would assume an easy walkover for LSU, but they obviously have issues with their coach not being around, and they're a young team. The key players on that ball club are Waters, Naz Reid, the freshman out of New Jersey, and Yale's very poised. Really had a great second half to win the Ivy League championship over Harvard. They have good size with an NBA prospect in Oni. Bruner's a good, big forward. And Alex Copeland is a very good guard. For Yale to win that game, they need to make threes. And players like Copeland can do that.
One of the things we focused on, how LSU's defense will go up against Yale and the way they like to use that high screen and roll, setting up those three-point shots. Kevin, let's talk about one of the other matchups in the East here, the 8 versus 9. This is VCU against UCF. VCU just won the first outright A-10 regular season title, going up against a UCF team that's making its first tournament title since 2005. Kevin, I'll be honest, I did one of their games earlier this season in New Orleans against Tulane, and Aubrey Dawkins, the son of head coach Johnny Dawkins, plays just like his dad. He is so dangerous on all angles of the floor. What do you think about this 8-9 matchup?
Yeah, I think the committee got the seeding wrong here. I think VCU is more like a 10 than an 8. I know they obviously had a great run through the Atlantic 10, but it was a very soft Atlantic 10. On top of that, they just lost to Rhode Island on last Friday, and their leading scorer, first-team All-League guy Marcus Evans, hurt his knee. He's questionable for the NCAA tournament. Hopefully he can get back on the floor. Excellent points with Central Florida. When you have Taco Fall, he's a unique player. There's no one else in the tournament like him, and I don't think that VCU has the size to be able to match up with someone like that.
Well, there's no doubt. You don't coach 7-7. He's a big presence when he takes the floor. And it's interesting, if they win that game, you got Johnny Dawkins maybe going up against Duke. Interesting how the NCAA does this.
It's funny how that stuff happens.
It's funny how it happens. And they did it again in this bracket, Kevin. And your thoughts on when you see number 10 Minnesota and their head coach going up against number 7 Louisville and the man that used to be their head coach. Funny how this works out, isn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, Richard Pitino, I've literally known him since he was probably born. He was born here in Rhode Island, came back to Rhode Island as a student manager at Providence College for 4 years, went to work for his dad, Rick Pitino, and now in a strange way, I can tell you one thing, the NCAA could care less if Louisville's upset about having Richard Pitino coaching against them. At this stage of the game, Louisville's been put on ice. They took the national title away from them a few years back. There's no tears in the NCAA offices for teams like Louisville, I can tell you that.
No, not at all, but it sure is funny to see some of these matchups. Kevin, stay with us. We're going to talk more with him. When we come back from this break, we'll turn our attention to the West bracket as the march to Minneapolis rolls on. We're glad you're with us. Get those brackets filled out. We're here to help you in any way we can. We'll be back with more here on Your View right after this.